Basics of research. Basics of research. Here we provide an introduction to basic research.
Well, I know before now for you, research was tough. But don't worry, you've met the online prof. And don't forget, I'm like a bee. Once I sting my lecture into you, research wahala will let you be. Just be no be.
So what we're going to do is to look at introductory aspects of research, whether it is advertising, public relations, or any aspect of social sciences. Research process is similar in all these areas. So we're going to look at the basics of research, and then you apply it to advertising and public relations. What is research? Research is a systematic way of finding solutions to an identified problem. That's the basic way of defining research. Research is problem-driven, so there has to be a problem for research to be meaningful. In fact, research cannot even take place in the first place without a problem statement, without a problem, a clearly defined problem.
If your company forces into the field to do research without a clear problem, well, when the money gets wasted, just say, "But I told them." Just follow what I'll teach now, and you will surely do a study. No one will condemn.
So research is scientific. It is systematic. That is to say, it is a systematic way of providing solutions to a problem. So research is a systematic investigation of a problem you want to tackle. That is research. So research is empirical. When we say research is empirical, it means that research is based on proven scientific methods from real observation. It's not just hearsay, or you just say that you observed this and then you saw that and conclude that this is the result. No, there has to be a systematic way of going after the problem bit by bit, identifying the cause of the situation, and then coming up with probable solutions to the problem. So research is a systematic investigation of a problem. The problem could be a situation, it could be a business, it could be something about the market, it could be anything that has to do with challenge, it could be about behavior or whatever. But the fact is that research is problem-driven. Functions of research. If you are engaged in any aspect of communication research, what's the essence of research in that aspect of communication? Whether it is advertising or public relations research, media research, you have basic functions of research. Then you apply it to the specific area you're carrying out the research on. We have basic functions. The first function is that research is used to solve problems. Of course, we said that research is problem-driven. So the basic thing is that you carry out research because you want to solve problem, and the problem has to be clearly defined. Otherwise, you'll be wasting your time in the field. In fact, there won't even be research in the first place if the problem is not clearly stated. So every other function of research is derived from this basic one, which is to solve problem. For instance, research is used to explore new areas. You want to know how things happen in a particular way, or how people behave in a particular way, you can carry out what we called earlier exploratory research, just to get basic knowledge of how people behave in a particular way. Maybe why people don't watch television late in a particular city, or why a particular class of people don't read newspapers. So you can carry out such research to get basic knowledge which other people could use in further studies. Research provides facts for planning. If it is advertising, public relations, in any organization, what research does is to provide facts that you're going to use to plan how you can run your company, to plan how you can make things work, to plan how you can achieve your objectives, to plan how you set your goals. So research, if for instance you are running a television company, you want to do audience research to find out what the audience like about night television, what kind of night programs audience like, the time during the day they watch television, so that you know the kind of programs you're going to set in for them. And then of course the nature of the audience, you want to find out what are the classes of audience, so that you also make your programs to suit the audience. And anything you're doing, the first step is to plan. The first step is to plan. And how do you plan? First step is to research. Get facts that you're going to use to set goals for yourself. Then research is used in information gathering, collection of data. To gather information on a particular problem or particular phenomenon you want to study, you need to do research. So research is used for information gathering, data collection, data you're going to use to solve problems, to take care of situations, to explain how people behave in a particular way. That is, if For instance, that's the kind of research you want to do. So research is basically for problem solving, for fact finding, to explore new areas, provide facts for planning. Of course, research helps companies to save funds because you don't just move into the market without understanding how the market behaves. You don't even begin a business without understanding the market behavior. So research helps you to save funds. So if you keep breaking down these things, you will understand that the basic thing is that research is used for fact finding and the facts are used to solve problems. Research is used to understand the relationship between variables. In fact, researchers set out to measure variables, to check variables, to assess variables.
Just note this: one important aspect of research is variable. Without clear variables, your work could be terrible. The study will not even be constructive, like the reasons they gave us for hiding palliative.
So what is a variable? A variable is something that changes or is likely to change. That's what they call variable. Variables are measured in the field by researchers. A variable could be a person, a thing, a place or situation that is likely to change. Now, we call them variables because you are trying to monitor them, to assess them, to see why they change, what makes them dynamic, what makes them take a particular turn or take a particular shape instead of the other. That's why they call them variable. For instance, exposure to television. Exposure is a variable because people don't watch television the same time, the same number of hours, the same day, the same way. They don't even like the same programs. So exposure is a variable. So if you want to do a study in communication and you want to check exposure to television and its influence on academic performance, it means that exposure is a variable because you want to check whether the number of hours they put into TV or whether watching TV in the first place influences their academic performance. So academic performance is also a variable because it means their grades change. Maybe they were having 60 or 70 before, suddenly they are beginning to have 30%, 40% as scores after tests. So academic performance changes. That is why you call it a variable. Exposure changes. But then there's what we call dependent and independent variable. Now, academic performance depends on exposure to television in this particular case because you are checking whether the way they watch television influences their performance in class. So the way they watch television is independent variable because it is on its own. It is what you're going to use to check whether the other one is being affected. So anytime you are doing a study and you have two variables and you want to see how one affects the other or how one influences the other, the one that you are checking whether it influences the other is the one they call independent variable. But the one you want to see whether it is influenced, whether it is going to be affected, is the one you call dependent variable. So you have dependent and independent variable. How do you identify research problem? How do you formulate research problem? So let's look at this. First of all, research problem is a difficulty or deficiency to be overcome. So you check whether there's a difficulty or a deficiency to be overcome in a particular company or a particular situation. That could be how you identify a situation that requires research. It could be that the products are no longer moving in the market. You don't even understand whether television advertising is helping your company. Maybe you want to check whether it is social media advert. Maybe advert on Snapchat, advert on TikTok, advert on blogs, advert on WhatsApp. Maybe those are the ones that will drive your company sales. So you don't understand. Then that's a problem. Maybe the deficiency is that workers are no longer showing dedication to their job the way they used to or the way they're supposed to. So this is something you want to understand. Then you can look at a condition to be improved upon. Remember I said that you can have a positive problem or a negative problem. So when you see a condition that could be improved upon, maybe the condition is not negative, you want to improve upon it, and that is positive problem. This thing is working out fine, so you want to improve upon it, and that could be how you get research problem. Then gap in knowledge. Gap in knowledge. This one has to do with maybe academic research. There's a gap in knowledge. Maybe people understand that the mass media influence people's buying behavior, but maybe there are no studies on whether social media, especially TikTok or Snapchat, whether they influence how people purchase products. That's a gap in knowledge. So gap in knowledge is the missing portion of a particular study area. What is missing in this particular area? They've been doing studies on newspaper coverage of this event, newspaper coverage of that disaster, but there is an aspect of the society that nobody has done a study to check how newspapers cover that area. That's a gap in knowledge. So once you identify such situation, That's a research problem. You now go out to study that problem. Then you could have a theory that requires further understanding. There are several theories out there. People have different theories in communication. You have agenda setting theory, you have uses and gratification theory, symbolic interaction theory, technological determinism theory, a lot of theories out there. So, but you could want to understand one better, or you think that this theory is defective, or you think that the theory needs to be expanded. That could be a research problem. That way, you have identified a problem, and then you set out to do a study that will help you either to enhance the understanding of that theory or even to add to it. You can also identify a research problem by looking at views held in different parts of the world which require validation in your own area. That is to say, views held in different parts of the world, whether they apply to your own area, maybe your own village or your own city or your own state or your own country. That is to say, you want to localize a study that has been done in the Western world. See whether that same thing applies in Nigeria or applies in a particular region in Nigeria. For instance, they've done studies abroad on the information-seeking behavior of diabetes patients in the US. Maybe they have results about the Western world, how it happens in the Western world, and you want to see how that happens in Nigeria. That's a research problem. You now localize it. So you can look at studies done in different parts of the world, find out the views they held about such studies, and then you localize it to your own area. You can say, let me replicate this study done in the Western world or done in a particular state, even in your country. Maybe a study that has been done on people in Edo State. You want to now do the study on people in Kaduna State to see whether it's the same situation. You can identify a problem by looking at views that are held about situations in different places to see whether they apply in your own area, your own locality, or your own study environment.
If you've not subscribed to my channel, please go and do so. Abeg, don't make my efforts sound hollow. No be nice job, sir. I go chop o. Abeg, subscribe now, make a quick blow.